have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship.
Hello. Tariq, you better get rid of that book. Oh, there we go. Hello. Yeah, the cover's still on, Tariq, by the way.
Yes. Please wait. We're getting there. You know, okay. we considering the audience can wait, as you can see. They're not eager.
I can carry on anyway.
No, you just wait, please. Just wait. The audience are not in a rush. I can't find where the banner is. Aha, got it.
Well, that was a fantastic introduction, I must say. A brilliant video. Who put that together?
And the flawless fugue into the introduction. Thank you.
Well, you know,
poor old Tariq has to do both the techniques as well as engaging with us. So there we go. So anyway, thank you for that nice great little piece of video. Really, thanks to Mr. Kalu for who made it. And thanks to Falafel Games for coming up with some of those wonderful graphics and for that rather haunting music. More about Falafel Games later on, I expect, in the broadcast. In the meantime, however, it is Mr. Kalu that we're particularly interested, and the recent publication of his novel One Drop. Those of you who have been following this triptych and perhaps some of these Pendemicus broadcasts will know that the three of us here have been have done a triptych of novels, a rather unusual literary event in which we have been writing novels that are separate and which don't necessarily involve the same characters, but are set in the same scenario, in the same world. And the world in this case is a possible future, or a possible alternative present, in fact, in which the UK government has been taken over and propped up by a faction of religious white supremacist fanaticists nicknamed the Bloods. And all three of our characters, all three of our novels are set in a UK in that world. Now, my novel, Three Bullets, got published last year. It's out now in paperback. And just recently, in August, I think it was, Pete's wonderful book, One Drop, has been published and is now available in a bookshop near you, and indeed on a computer near you as well. Thank you, Mr. Kalu. And so we're here to discuss it, to celebrate it. It is a fantastic book, and provided a lot of the central ideas which both Tariq and I have used in our own books. And Pete is now here to discuss it with us and to tell us a little bit about it. So, Mr. Kalu, a couple of questions for you. Okay, partly specifically about One Drop, but also about the context of writing this book, with me and Tariq looking over your shoulders, because of course, we all edited one another quite heavily. Pete, I wouldn't like to say you got edited more than anyone else, because you didn't, but there we go. So First of all, though, to just think about the book in terms of itself, the main idea behind it, which has both sort of great ideological weight as well as providing the main impetus of the story, was this idea of rewriting, this idea that you can be held in a camp and that these white supremacist ideologists in control have implanted a chip in the brain, and by this means they're wiping your memory and implanting a new identity in you, one which is, in which black people are actually genuinely inferior and white people are actually superior, and the second coming of Christ is just around the corner. I remember you, while we were discussing this, going on at some length and discussing at some length where those ideas come from. Could you give us a little background to where you got that idea, how you developed it, and how you used it in the book?
Thank you, Melvin. Yes, thanks for that warm introduction. The idea of rewriting was something that I've been watching in terms of the technological advances in the human-machine interface, if I may describe it in that way, and the way in which you can embed various things in your body now. So I think it's technologically possible now to embed your credit card into your thumbnail or whatever, or into your thumb, and you can just scan through any place that needs a credit card or an ID using your body itself and the embedded chip. And then I remember there was, not to panic anybody here, but I remember there was the heart pacemaker worry that they actually communicate using remotely with machinery. You don't need to take them out or plug them into any kind of wires or anything anymore. They can do that using technology. So it came about that it might be possible to actually rewrite the software. So if there's anybody important wandering around who you wanted to eliminate, you could just hack the software and then heart pacemaker may just back up or kill them off. So I was intrigued by that. And then at the same time, there's the idea of artificial intelligence, which is, as you see, making strides into the way in which we live our lives and the interactions we have on a day-to-day level. I was interested in the way in which artificial intelligence was able to replicate, if crudely, the way in which human beings think and act. I think my interest started with the idea of expert systems whereby you could, I remember there was at one time that you could ask, let's say, a professor of medicine 101 questions, 1,001 questions. And if you asked enough questions and you would be able to model how that person thought. And then if they sadly passed away, you could actually continue to ask them questions because the process was there, and that was maybe 20, 30 years ago that was being developed. So, you fast forward and you have Elon Musk with his embedded chips that he's commented about. And at the same time, you have, from the point of view of the sort of political scenario, you have this idea of the semiotics idea that there are signals, there are signs everywhere in the real world, which in effect tell us how to think, advertising, news media, etc., etc. And so it was the hybridization of all these different ideas into one line of the plot, and a very central, as you say, a very central idea of the plot that we could actually reprogram people so that we wipe their existing memories, implant memories that were more in tune with that of the regime that took over. And in that way, you wouldn't need any revolutions or anything. You'd just be able to rewrite the people. Rewrite
your enemies. Yes, so the victors, as they say, always write history, in this case, directly into the brain. That's that idea that you could actually write the ideology directly into someone's brain. Of course, it's very exciting. For those who haven't read the book as yet, Pete has two characters, June and Axel, two lovers who've been captured and put in the experimental prison camp, the ERAC, the Evangelical Realignment Center, near Peterborough, and they're being rewritten, and they have to sort of hang on to who they are and onto their memories. And one of the fascinating things I thought, Pete, about this idea was how it ties in. You mentioned the political aspect of this, of the triptych and this book in particular, and there's something, isn't there, to do with identity politics here, with who you are, with Black identity and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about your thinking behind that and what you were trying to say and how you were trying to say it in the context of that that idea of identity and memory and being rewritten?
Yeah, just first of all, from the more technical aspect, the thinking was that if you're going to try and rewrite somebody, if you're going to try and tamper with their sense of self, and memory is a key part of our sense of self, then it's probably easier to do it along the edges of memory, but deep memory would be harder to remove. And the thinking was that the deep memory, which would be attached to emotions, the very emotional things that occur in your life, they get written naturally more deeply into your long-term memory, and erasing those would be the most hard thing to do. So to move into the core of the love story of One Drop, it is love, actually, which is a very deep emotion, which is most difficult to erase. And so in terms of if we move to the racial aspect, in terms of racial identities or the Black politics or whatever, then trying to erase those things that you live, which are an aspect of your cultural identity, would be difficult. Trying to erase those things that are part of your personal identity, of the people who loved you, who've surrounded you, that would be most difficult. And so it all gets focused by this idea. I think June says to Axel, which is that so long as I have you, I will be able to retain my identity. So long as you keep loving me, I will continue in this world. But when that love is gone, then my last anchor will go, and I'll be erased.
How is the book, P? It's okay talking about sort of modern technology and stuff like that. To what extent is the historical component guided you? Why choose the title One Drop? Why have the setting of Black people being written to lose their identity? Why have that as a component?
Well, I think it's an ongoing real process that occurs in society, that the way in which white dominance is exerted is by the reduction of the identity of racialized as Black people. And so that reduction usually occurs in by the way of stereotype, etc. So I think that the way in which One Drop works is sci-fi. Yeah, it is a kind of technological leap into a near future, but it's very much a real process in the now of time, and it's a process that's been going on for a long time. You can go back to, well, it's the advent, if we must, of colonialism and the idea of race, which was the idea of the erasure of the fullness of the humanity of those peoples that whites decided they wanted to control in order to take their resources. So racism itself is a process of erasure of Black people, and the technology is almost a metaphor for that.
Mm. I mean, were you like, I do recall a time when I really resented the color of my skin, but really thanks to a lot of white kids at school and the boots of white boys, certainly after I left school or sometime their knees. And in terms of the intense violence, and I know many kids as well today who actually don't want to be Black, don't want to have any other color, and just want to hide in whiteness. To what extent of your personal experiences came into the writing of this book, or those of your friends?
Oh, from my own personal background, point of view, I would say the reverse was the case. That actually, if I may go into my family history, my father was a very, very proud man, and he really did think that the way in which white people behaved around him was a sign of their own idiocy. So, so it's quite the reverse, you know, because he came from a family that didn't have that constant advertising-led, media-led reduction in the idea of who you could be. Or
You
who
mean
you were.
Nigeria? You mean
Yes,
from
yes, he
Nigeria?
came from Nigeria.
Well,
Yeah,
why
and
would he? Yeah, why would he
Yeah.
have a contact? This issue I'm raising exists within white society.
And so and then going through school again, there was a certain cachet actually to being black. Now it might be very complicated, and that cachet may even have had black people leaning into stereotypes because those were the only things available for them that had a bizarrely sort of bizarrely positive identity, you know, but nevertheless, the idea of blackness was actually something that we celebrated at school in the teeth of the descriptions that were being written over us, you know, that we're being labeled with. And we fought against the expectation that we would fail our exams. We fought against the expectation that we were just good at sport and nothing else. And I can't say we won those battles. We won all those battles. We didn't. And you know, we was a whole society that decided to bring us under those kind of reductive labels. But nevertheless, I don't think we were apathetic. I don't think we were unaware. I mean, one of the biggest challenges to really get at it and see how good you guys' memories are is when Planet of the Apes came out. Don't you remember that? It was Alex Haley's Planet of the Apes, which sorry, not Planet of the Apes. It was what was the other one? Planet of the Apes was a big challenge. We can go back to that one because, of course, all the stereotypes were there for black people, and then that was a fight in school as we were constantly labelled apes, and that was one of the battles that we took on. But the Alex Haley Roots one was another one where we had this ambivalent thing in that, yeah, great, you know, now we were fighting for our freedom, but you know, we were all labeled at that time Kunta Kinte, you know, and all those slurs came out at the same time. So we went through school with these constant battles about how we were defined, and we were trying to define ourselves. Maybe I just had a good bunch of black friends and we fought together, and I don't think that that is necessarily typical of everybody's experience, every black kid's experience through school. And I take your point absolutely that for some people, and you might look at the current ministerial level of politics in Britain, some people are going the other way and say, okay, the best way for us to get through life is actually to become what white supremacy would like us to become, facilitators of that very process.
We've always had that. If you go back in Malcolm X's times, you know.
So perhaps it's time to return to the book a little bit. I mean, the politics behind it are fascinating and interesting. Pete, perhaps it's time for a reading.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, a passage or two.
Yeah, I do feel that. The politics is absolutely, you know, important and central to what we're doing. Yeah, but at the same time, there's a love story in it, and you know, I do believe that the very thing we're arguing that our humanity is constantly reduced. The idea that, you know, we have beating hearts is something that is central to the project.
Well, yes, I mean, I think anyone who reads it, you know, those two characters have such a strong identity and such a powerful relationship. It is a very moving love story.
I must say that you know, every time we went and saw you develop it, the love aspect is the one that'll be remembered. All the old men talk about politics and one drops. Well, you know, if we didn't do that, we would.
It's interesting, and it is fundamental. Once you've sort of established that, which is it's kind of, I think, in One Drop and in your book, and I hope in mine as well, the politics is sort of embedded in the story, isn't it, and in the characters and in the situation. I mean, just before reading, Pete, since Tariq's mentioning the process of development, of course, we were all looking over one another's shoulders while these
Excuse-
books are being developed.
And mine's still being looked over.
Yes, I'm just about to start reading Tariq's again, and I'll be giving copious notes, I expect. Anyway, well, we did this. We discussed it. We discussed the world. Both Pete and Tariq were very good with me in helping me out with Black history, Black politics, all these issues. But we also read one another's drafts. We made notes, so it was quite an intensive process. I was quite lucky in that I'm the only one who doesn't. I don't have another job, so I was able to rip through mine quickly. So by the time I'd done it, of course, then that was the sort of certain parameters had been laid down because of the timeline. You can't break up timelines and so on. So Pete, what was it like working with two other writers with very different points of view, discussing, editing, and sometimes being critical of what you were doing?
I enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. I think me and Tariq go back 20 years of rewriting each other's novels, and we constantly argue about who wrote what in any one text, which sometimes we can't remember,
I'm glad you knocked 10 years out of that process.
Well, Tariq, I'm trying to keep young. Yeah, and so it was lovely to welcome you, Melvin. Another energy, a different energy with a different perception, different technique.
I found it fascinating, and I would have to say, to anyone listening, Pete and Tariq were incredibly generous with their time and with as I say, the politics and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was a great process.
We loved it. I mean, one of the things that Tariq has constantly reminded me, not overtly, but just being in Tariq's presence. He's a lovely guy, and we always have a good time. And writing, almost we are writing. We are there to do the work. Maybe it's why Melvin zips ahead. We make sure we have a good time while we're we're doing, whatever we're going. We're on this earth just once, so he cooks. Sometimes I get invited to cook, but only very quickly, and the invite withdrawn because my skills don't fall into that area.
Let's face it, Pete. He cooks, you eat.
Yes, the honest to God truth is, okay. He cooks, I eat. He buys the booze, I drink the booze. But,
on this note, there must be. We have a grand total of one viewer, so they deserve a bit more respect, whoever they may be. They deserve a bit more respect, and they need you to read something now. And whilst you read, you will become center screen, and in that time period, I will refill, and I'll be able to hear whether you're doing a good job or not. And here we go.
Thank you for that warm introduction. Here, this is a section from the early part of the novel when June and Axel are not yet locked up in the prison camp, and it gives a sense of the prevailing atmosphere, the intensification of that movement towards fascism, and it also gives you a sense of the love story that's going on. Here we go. The section's called The Wagon. We left the car in the mud patch of a tractor turning point. Mum took out a large canvas bag and veered west into a field of baled straw that had a slight incline and became a conifer forest. Dad took us due east across the same field and kept us going, telling us not to turn around. Soon we were among tree trunks and dragonflies. There was a stream running through the trees where dark pools held shoals of fingerland silver fish. Small black biting flies hovered above the stream water. We kept on, and as the trail got rockier, Dad started huffing with the cool box, but not letting us help. We made it past the last tree line of the woods and into a clearing that was almost lawn. Dad got the cool box opened. It was maybe a fake picnic, but there was no reason not to enjoy it. A fish does not know the meaning of water, Dad began in his sage on the mountain tone as the lid of the cool box hinged back. The air was dry, with flecks of hay occasionally flicking across. Is that right? June said, grabbing a chicken drumstick. Yes, think about it. Being a fish, being always in water, a fish has no awareness of not water to compare with the state of being in water. Carry on, said June. They took another piece of chicken. June was an Olympic eater. and you had to be fast around them. Dad hesitated, but found his mojo. My point is, we are sometimes immersed in things and have no awareness we are immersed in them, like now, with the rise of fascism. I got attacked last week, said June. What happened, said Mum. She'd rejoined us, minus the canvas bag. Nothing, the usual. Some random threw a punch at me. I hit them back and ran. Was it Bloods? Mum pressed. Yeah, Bloods cadets. You know you're family to us, June, said Dad. Are you adopting me? Might as well, I joked, seeing as you spend most of the time around ours. And June is welcome, said Dad. I'd trust them with my life. June nodded. Their eyes flicked at the chicken Dad was holding. Makes you fam, right? Said Dad, biting on the last spicy chicken wing. Now, I'ma just lie back, close my eyes, and bathe in this sunlight like a fish in water. Dad rested his head on Mum's stomach. You two don't wander off, said Mum. Appreciate nature. Look at those beautiful fields yonder. Yonder? I quizzed. Yes, yonder, confirmed Mum. She was a trained librarian. She knew these kinds of words. She wagged a finger vaguely at the greenery around us. Dad had this amazing ability to go to sleep at the drop of a chewed chicken bone, and he was soon snoring. Mum's eyelids fell too. June edged closer. Me and June watched the countryside around us for about 3 seconds. Then it was clear that the open air and sun and stuff had got June frisky. They began rubbing me. This was nuts. I trapped their hand. June turned onto their chest. Your dad's getting old, they said. See how he struggled with the cool box? He's not old, he's unfit. All the days he spends staring at screens. What about me? Said June. Am I fit? I grinned into the grass. This was June all over, fishing for compliments. Good try, I said, but this conversation has now ended. The sky was sheer soap blue. The fields were a patchwork of colours in pastel tones of brown and green and yellow, ruffling from the horizon towards us all the way up to the broad zip fastener of the road. Then after that, larger and larger patches of flowing green fields, right up to where my head was now resting on June's softly rising and falling stomach as my hand kept theirs from wandering. I had my eyes half closed, so my eyelashes played with the sun's rays, when I heard this distant rumbling sound. I looked up. It was coming from the road. The sight confused me. I sat up to see it clearer. I thought it was scarecrows at first, sat vertically in the back of one of those farmers' wagons with the steel slatted upper bodies that are towed by tractors. But as I looked more closely, I saw it was human beings, not scarecrows. Every one of them, dark-skinned, tall, nappy-headed, and dressed in rough clothes. They were stood up in the wagon, being jolted and jostled as it was towed along the road at some speed. I think I'll pause there, and we can continue it later, perhaps. But there you go. That's a scene in which the immigrant loss campaign of the proto-fascists is in full swing, and they're picking up migrants from the countryside and rounding them up and taking them into the camps.
Oh, I was hoping you'd carry on. I love that scene.
Well, I was going to carry on, Terry, but I couldn't find the next page, so I thought
it's usually just very little further along in the book, Pete.
Yeah, well, as soon as I read it out of the paper, yeah.
Reading it out of the paper.
You're so cheap.
Your own book with you, you cheapskate.
Honestly, I mean, it's not AIM, it's publishers. I wouldn't even give you a book. And you're waiting.
Hey, listen, mate, that was a great reading.
That was it.
So, okay, another question, Pete. I remember when you were started writing this, you did it in a rather peculiar fashion. You didn't do what most of us do, which is start at the beginning and go to an end, did you? You wrote it in a rather more random kind of fashion. Do you want to? And I mean, it did give it a very particular quality. Do you want to give us a quick hands up about that particular technique that you used, which is something I haven't come across that often?
Yeah, well, I was interested in the idea that we don't live in the constant present with a linear approach to the past and the future. At any one time, we might be in three places, in the past, in the present, and in the future. And the problem of text of literature is that it's forced to be linear because one word has to follow another, whereas if you look at a painting you can go any which way you like. You can go up, down, across, etc., etc. So as a form, literature tends to dictate linearity, and So I was looking at a way of trying to give the sense of a character whose memory is being erased and who therefore doesn't have the anchors, the strength to have a very clear idea of their own timeline. And I found a piece of software online, a program online, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it, that allows you to
Not the BBC. You can mention what you like.
well, this we'll edit that bit. And it allows you to shuffle the chapters. And I was at one point thinking that the novel, if it were to be published, should be published as a set of chapters that were independent, structurally, physically independent of one another, and that any reader could take the bundle that was a novel, shuffle the chapters in any which way they liked, and then it should still make sense in terms of what I'm trying to do, the world that I'm trying to create, and the consciousness, the mind of the characters that I'm trying to deliver. So that was the thinking behind it, which gave it, obviously quite a staccato and free flowing.
And of course, once it got into the hands of the publisher, Anderson Press, they wanted the element that, of course, that particular technique doesn't serve, which is story. You can't really have a story if you're jumping around all over the place, or you can, but then you're kind of jumping around in time. So at the end, right, when we see the finished thing, and I remember that staccato version of the earlier books, the earlier drafts, and so forth. What benefits do you think it gave you, that technique, and did it cause any problems for the finished piece?
I think the benefits of that approach is that it's actually, if we sort of reverse engineer, we can go backwards into something that you once said many years ago, probably 10, 20 years ago, where you said, write the scenes you love. Don't worry about the rest. Just write the scenes you love. And that's the best way to get a book out. And of course, this approach means that you don't need to worry about getting from A to C. If you don't really want to write B, you can just write the A and C. In fact, you can write C first and then the A. And this book, One Drop, I actually wrote the last scene first. I wrote the last scene in my head before I even wrote any of the book, in truth. And there's a video online where I mention it. It's 5 years ago. I was interviewed by I think Emily Spears at Lancaster University, where I was talking about writing a book like this, and I do describe the last scene, and the last scene is there in One Drop. So it's a shuffle element. It gives you the freedom to exult, or to really go to town on those scenes that you like, without worrying about, as I say, without the B. You go A, C, and of course, like you say, the plot demands we go and revisit B. I could continue, but Tariq was
just along that lines. So, did you think that by the time the thing had been edited, so that Charlie Shepherd Anderson is an excellent editor. I've worked with her. She's very good, very successful editor as well. Very successful, and nevertheless, of course, what the publisher wants for a commercial piece, as I say, is a much stronger narration. Did you think that the piece lost anything in that process?
Well, you know what? We're pushing this out to the editors, but it's you two. You two lost me a lot in the process. Don't be pushing it on the editors and the publishers, Melvin. It's you and Tariq destroyed part of my work in under the demands of having a novel that was publishable, sellable, coherent, and things like that. Do you remember the last chapter where the AI takes over completely?
Pete,
yeah,
I remember the last chapter. I remember the bottle that produced it. And I remembered the way that the code came out and what you ate before it. So the last chapter may have had some sense, but sometimes, there is a problem with English.
Hey, I have a punchline to that last chapter. That last chapter that you two edited out is now getting published by Comma Press.
Well,
there you go. We did you a favour in that we made One Drop publishable, and you got a short story out of it as well. Well, I hope all the other stuff that we chucked out, I hope you get some money out of that as well.
What he's not telling
all of it's going to be sellable as short stories. But yes, I did feel, certainly, you put me on the spot there. I did feel that if it was going to be a publishable thing, yeah, you know, it did have to have a story, and that the experimental way of writing it was interesting, but I couldn't really see it as well. But anyway, do you think whether it's with the you know, the final publisher Charlie, or whether it was Tariq and I, do you think that that it lost anything that you wish was still there?
No, for the previous reason that actually I enjoyed the process of writing. I really enjoyed the craziness of writing in that unstructured way. It was a great joy, and it took a lot of pressure off, you know, because you could basically write whatever you liked in whatever order you like, and then we'd start delivering in various forms. I would go back to the idea of the story world that we all created. The story world is what we've created and that still exists, and it manifests in different ways. It manifests, yes, as the novel, which has a greater linearity, more story, if you like, more plot. But we've also created the games. You know, we've also created music. There are many different ways of bringing that story world that we've created into art, and so it's not an either or situation for me, as I said. And I jest, you know, I did jest, but I can adapt the code elements that maybe were lost because they were pushing away from the story. I can adapt them, and I did for the short story with Comma Press, and I can adapt the other pieces. One thing that I did lose, I would say, and that was correct for me to lose, was some of the exuberance of the early text was because the characters were younger when I started out writing them, and I felt that in order to do the themes justice, I had to make the characters a lot older, and so some of the bubbliness and exuberance that was in the early drafts faded away.
Perhaps I could ask you, Pete, here. You know, you've called it one drop, and we started today's discussion on music, and you just referred to it. Perhaps to remind a few that join us at this stage, would you like to have it played again and explain what the historical significance of the one statement that we use in this? Because I've used it in mine as well. And Melvin, you have, I believe, or not? I can't remember now on that.
Yeah.
Would you like?
I don't know whether I might have had it as a piece of graffiti or something. I don't know.
Okay. Would you like it played again so that?
Yes, I do enjoy the video.
Okay, we'll play it, and then to explain that we have not only created a world, but that world created 3 novels, which in turn have led to the development of a demo of the video game. And the novels in themselves, whilst they are full of love and life, certainly yours and Melvin's is, that they are also of a terrifying perspective world, one which is love, life, is totally destroyed by powers outside our control. And perhaps we could then come back to the discussion both on getting to this point and how the games evolve and why all these images that have come in, where do they come from? What does the song in itself mean? And are you worried somebody will criticize us?
I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. White blood, white blood, white blood, white blood. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship. I have one drop of white blood in me. That is the blood I worship.
Ooh, that gives me the creeps all around my back. It really does.
Nice bit of video, Pete. Well done.
It's terrifying, Pete. Where does it come from? the line?
The line one drop, of course, comes from the Southern America. It was United States, Southern United States, time of the color bar, and during that time there was this idea that that you were black if you had one drop of black blood within you, and therefore the social consequences of that followed, which were that you were diminished, reduced, controlled in a way that actually echoed apartheid laws in South Africa at that time. So that was the one drop. Interestingly, and not to disappear down that rabbit hole, there's also a process between Protestants and Catholics in which that one drop idea was present, and that was way before it became a racialized idea. So that was the idea taken into this near future alternative world where the bizarre situation that in order to survive a white supremacist regime, you had to, in the narrative of the story, or the story we've created, you had to embrace the one drop of white blood that was within you. And the fight between those who would say the words in order to survive and those who simply refused to say those words, who stood for a kind of principle that would cause them great grief under that regime. So that was the history of it, Tariq, in brief.
The British cabinet is complete proof of that at the moment, but we'll leave that. And I believe the old mother of the pedophiles has gone. May God bless, the future. But anyway, so how did you move from there? How do we all move from a novel to the scenes opening up in that little video clip? We've got a sort of a video image of a prison camp, and it's an American vehicle outside by the looks of it. Where are we? Where did all that come from?
That was a strange journey, wasn't it, for all three of us? In terms of my process as a writer, when I write, I'm often not just working with words. I'll sometimes be working with images. I'll gather images around me of things that seem to chime with it. And I remember when I said to you two, I'm also going to do some songs, I saw your faces drop and you were like, oh God, Pete's had too much to drink yet again. And I will say the early songs merited that response too, but yeah, I do like to work in several mediums, and I've been studying how to write in a storytelling form called Twine, which gives you the possibility of having more than one ending, so that disrupts the linearity. You know how I don't like the linearity. I wasn't feeling it at that time, and I know you teach digital storytelling as well, Tariq, and so there was this kind of synergy between me and you there. Melvin had some digital games made from some of his previous works, or maybe born digital works that he created in a digital format. So we all had enough energy to get involved and go down this sort of parallel creative road of developing the games, and that's how I felt it went. I really enjoyed it too.
Interesting stuff. So, should we discuss the game for a little bit that's being made and the development of this game?
Let us take this question from Kathy,
Kathy,
then come to the game.
Hi, Kathy. Sorry, I was going to say something to you on comments, but I haven't got any comments for some reason on my thing. Can you write in comments, Pete?
Can we just answer the question? How do the three books fit with the world? Are they linear or set in different times? Do they feature the same characters? How do our three novels work? Okay, we've got one word.
Well, Kathy, the idea of writing something in the same physical world. Okay, that's the basic thing. Tariq did a lot of the initial work in describing the political scenario. As you might have gathered, Tariq's particularly keen on the historical and political significance of events and in the story structure. And this idea that the Americans had defaulted on the dollar and that the various American forces abroad therefore weren't being paid and might sort of be mercenary and so forth, that there would be a civil war in America. and that you would end up with a government here which was actually quite similar to the kind of government that you might imagine in America if the South had won the Civil War, or if the South indeed were to win another civil war now, which is perhaps not beyond the bounds of possibility. And therefore sort of white supremacist, very, very far to the right and so forth. Now, I've tried to write novels with other people before, and I've found it very hard because, you know, it's a bit like herding cats, isn't it? You know, novelists want to go off in different directions. You know, if you want to do something communally, you're better off doing it on TV, really, writing in a series or something. But all three of us, you know, these two guys have written all sorts of things. But this was novels, and of course, everyone wanted to go off in their own direction. And the idea of having the same characters just actually appalled me, because, you know, then they'd have to fit into the right place and at the right time and in the right way and be doing the right things, and they'd have to have sort of character continuity between them. So I was very much against having the same characters. And what I wanted and what I think sort of came about was that these novels kind of brush against one another. So my character, Marty, for example, ends up in the vicinity of Pete's Iraq, the Evangelical Realignment Center. She's bringing some software there which might help reverse the process which is happening. You know, that's the thing. So it's linked. So you know about Pete's place. You know that's going on. Marty also sees, knows that the Bloods are coming north. She sees she's got to journey right down into the south in the Bloods' heartland. She sees graffiti about the second coming. So she's referring in this way to the main theme in Tariq's novel, which is about the idea that these people are planning the second coming of Jesus Christ. So in this sense, they brush against one another and they acknowledge one another. But and that was hard enough, you know. Like I, for example, started off with my character living in Manchester and leaving Manchester because the Bloods had been clearing out the sort of Asian population, the South Asian population. So there was a great movement of, you know, Pakistani people and Indian people being driven out of London and going to Birmingham, and now they've been driven out of Birmingham and they were arriving in Manchester, and just trying to get these two to stick to the idea that they were going bloody north, you know, as opposed to somewhere else was hell on legs. So, you know,
Melvin in geography, he's got this mania for it. You know, everything had to be in the right place. Exactly. If I was even 50 miles out of where I should have been when his characters were passing through, he'd be like, you know, rolling on the floor.
It has to work as a world. You know, it has to hold together as a world. You can't in the same timeline have someone in two different places, Pete. You know. So it wasn't that anyone was deliberately doing this. It's oh yeah, and then this can happen, you know. And then it's like, yeah, but hang on a minute. This was the great advantage, I'd have to say, Kathy, of me writing mine first and getting mine published first. Because as soon as it was published, you know, they could not say, oh no, I want it to be somewhere else, because it was too late, wasn't it, guys? It was too late. So that was how it worked. So basically, the novels are within the same time frame, but not necessarily happening simultaneously. It was difficult to get it set, as you can see from Pete's remarks there. You know, and Tariq's book's still under development, and you know how that's going to fit in with the various movements of people and troops and so forth, and indeed how it relates to the timeline in Mind Peace. I mean, my character does arrive at the Iraq, doesn't get into the Iraq, but delivers the software, and that is the cause of certain developments in Pete's book. So they have a sort of continuity of timeline. Tariq's, I think, is perhaps set a bit earlier, Tariq's, isn't it, really? Because we're following your character as they are evacuated, or not evacuated.
Well, she did go,
pushed out of Birmingham and pushed out of London.
Yeah, she did get taken to Iraq, the camp. So she has had a visit when it was decided that in her particular case, we won't take the thunder away from Peter at the moment, that you know, her particular situation, having the implants in the brain were not conducive. So she was taken back out of there. However, the world is the same. The rulers are the same. The resistance is the same. The desire to live is the same. The desire to love is the same in its own way. And it's a big learning curve for all of us. But Peter's one is really an incredible roller coaster. I mean, in terms of how, if all you have left to hold on to is your memory, and that's what makes us us. And if we hold on to our memory, that's what makes us human. And if they can't take our memory away, we can certainly take away their power away, so long as we hold on. But let's go back now to the, thank you, Kathy. Let's go back to the question of the game, Pete and Melvin, because we had a choice here. The game is in development, 3 vast novels, 3 huge places, and we want to be able to demonstrate how a game in a real world with drones, with prison camps, with rewriting and playing is. I mean, now I'm beginning to get terrified of the very game we've been developing. If you heard that, those of you who heard the music earlier on, imagine that as a tool of torture in a game. So how do we move? I mean, I know my process, Pete, but what about you? Because we set the demo of the game as an example, primarily in a camp setting of your characters.
Yeah, for me, the game was an advent for me because I'd never done an RPG game in this 3D way. My background is writing Twine, which is 2D really, with and it's a really it's very much a word storytelling form. The words drive it, and so I think what we did first of all was we tried to design a model of game that played to our strengths, that played to us as writers, and so I remember the process by which we were looking at different models, different ways in conjunction with the help of Falafel Games. They were nudging us this way, nudging us that way, asking us to scope it out and research. I do believe Melvin did some of that scoping and researching too, and we kind of converged on. I don't know if this is technically correct, but we kind of converged on what was effectively, I think, is it a tower defense thing? It's like, it's a static thing. We're not growing all over the place. We've got one place, the prison camp, and the idea is break out of it. So it's a very restrained version of that story world we created.
You can have different levels and different access to different places within the prison camp, of course.
Yes,
so you can have different areas opening up, and indeed, if the game were to develop fully, you could do all sorts of things.
Yeah, this is with the generous support of the British Council, we should add, as well as a number of other organizations, and we hope in time to come to have a decent demo. Now, as we're on online setup, can anyone see you in real life person and find out whether that's a wig on the back of your head or not? Is there anywhere people are going to see you, Mr. Kalu?
Oh, okay. Well, there are those. I do have a number of fans that is greater than one, but both my brothers and sisters are unavailable on the day when they can see me. But yes, on the 22nd of September, we're doing a launch at Portico Library in city centre of Manchester in the evening. And there will be myself, Tariq Mahmood, Melvin Burgess, and we'll be talking about the books. We'll be doing readings from the book and taking questions, usual format. It's a lovely building. Hopefully it'll be a lovely evening. So do get along and join us if you can. 22nd of September at Portico Library in city centre Manchester. If you Google, if you search Eventbrite One Drop Peter Kalu or Triptych, it should come up.
So it's the Portico Library. That's right in the city centre of Manchester. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Just down from the art gallery.
Just down from the art gallery. And is it correct that if somebody like me turns out that I'm going to be taken out courtesy of you, Melvin, or the Portico Library?
What do you mean?
You're taken not out, not thrown out of the building, but taken
Well, we'll
out
happily throw you out if you like, Tariq. I would
after
add
the building.
one more place that you've been thrown out of.
It's all right. It's really true. I
Add to
have been
the
thrown out far better places than Protocol Library. But how will people be able to buy your fabulous book, Pete?
They'll be able to buy it at Portico Library on the 22nd of September, but it's available from all good bookshops and several bad ones, and online too. So, you know, it's out there. Go grab a copy. It's a fantastic book.
I would urge anyone to go and buy it. It is a great book. I know that I'm sort of, you know, kind of sideways involved in it, but it was a great book, and this fascinating central idea of rewriting and the implications of it in terms of, you know, politics, in terms of identity. You know, it's an idea with a huge amount of scope and depth. I would also just make the point that we have in the past sort of suggested that the world isn't closed, and that if people do want to try and write within it, we are open to suggestions. Is that not right, gentlemen?
This wasn't a live discussion, but yes, indeed.
It has been. We have mentioned it in the past, Tariq, publicly.
Well, now that you've mentioned it, you're a very wise man, and all words of wisdom deserve a response. God, this tea is very nice, you know. And I think that
is that tea why you're becoming slightly more incomprehensible as the broadcast goes on, Tariq?
Excuse me, I am not in the UK. I am outside the country, 2 hours ahead of you. It's very dark here. But
relevance, Rana, relevance.
Relevance is that, yes, we should actually invite people to come and explore this world of the ones that we've helped to create, because it's not our creation, simply. The social, political dynamics and cultural dynamics around us are creating it. You know, all we've done, I live in Beirut, for those who don't know, and all we've done is to try to create a mirror image of what Britain, France, America, and others have done to Syria.
Well, we must say, it must be said that other writers have joined in already. We developed, with the British Council's collaboration and Commonwealth Culture's collaboration, we developed 7 or 8 twine stories that are set roughly in the story world that we developed.
Yes.
And it's also true that the visual artist Akin Oludele, who the video that you saw, much of the artwork in that video is his artwork. And again, an absolutely fascinating artist. You just sit down next to him, describe the world. He asks various questions, and he develops it almost on the spot using the technologies he's got, the iPads and whatever that he's got.
And is it not the case that Mully's having a bash at doing something?
It's true that we've got another writer, Mully Amaye, who's developing a novel that's set in our story world, and I'm sure there are others who we don't know about who may be developing things, and that's all. Despite perhaps Tariq's sensible reservations, I think it's all good. Some of it is a form of fan fiction. Maybe people just saying, "Hey, you know, let me do this. I can see this," and they start throwing things at me, you know, paintings, drawings, music, etc.
Okay.
But others are writing novels, yeah, and that's fantastic.
And we have, for those who in the last few minutes, it is called what is it? www.ruledbritannia.net. Is that right?
Yeah. Well done, yeah.
Ruled Britannia. Type it into the comments, Drake. I can't.
How do you type Britannia? Britannia. Is that right?
I'll type it in private chat so you can.
You know what?
Type
it yourself and ruled, as in, you know, past tense, ruled Britannia.
Britannia.net. Listen, I'm going to put it here for posterity. If I've got Britannia.
And listen, if you turn up on the 22nd of September, or even if we do another show, we've got a number of songs. I know Tariq and Melvin may say, Pete, but we do have a number of songs that have been composed and written around the story world, around One Drop. And we did a show at Jam Street in Whalley Range, Manchester, about a month ago. Everyone was raving about the songs. Yeah, they bought the books. That's an accolade in itself. But they were raving about the song. Come along, you may be able to hear some of the songs. They've been developed by a fantastic artist who is Melvin.
It's Peter's
Yeah, no,
daughter.
I was at that gig, and I can say actually they are great songs. And
Right.
Naomi's got a great stage presence. She's a great singer. Are we? We're sort of winding down now.
We
chaps?
are winding down. Let us say farewell to those who are listening to us, those who will listen to us, and anyone who gets to the end of our rants deserves a free book, if we can. But thank you very much for joining us. I hope next time one of this lot does the technical side and presses the button.
No
For this
chance.
one,
Yeah,
I've
you've been
done it.
hoping for about 1.5 years so far, Tariq.
Bye now. All
Bye for
right.
now.
Bye.
Oh, thank
Take care.
you.